Michael Cashman, Contrib Italia. On the subject of terminal efficiency, productivity, etc., etc. When are the shipping lines going to get the volume forecasts a little bit accurate so that we can have an idea of what's coming? When are we going to finally deal with things like simple things that people have been talking about for 20 or 30 years? Stowage, crane intensity, mix of cargo. All of that goes into all of those numbers. And, you know, the terminal side, I don't know if there's any other terminals here today, but these are the issues that we're continuously dealing with, meeting after meeting after meeting, but we don't seem to have any progress globally. I know Maersk has got a different approach.
Hans, do you have a comment on that at all?
Yeah, I completely agree. From our side, when I meet the terminals, this is, you know, we cannot just bring a ship and then say you fix it. You know, I mean, if we don't share accurate information about what, you know, what our plan is, so the terminal can make their plan, it's going to be very difficult. And yeah, I think can it be better? Yes, but these are the conversations we're having. And I think also one of the practical things, for instance, is that, you know, it takes two to tango. So I think in some of the terminals, what we agree is that, listen, if we don't do our job in giving you the correct information, we don't expect you to do your job is in driving higher productivity. But of course, you then need to have a discussion around, well, what can you actually expect, right? So what are the margins of error? How many late run containers can you have? How can still a stowage change at the last moment, et cetera, et cetera? But those, no, I think I completely agree. Those are the discussions to have.
Okay. Do our consultants have a view on that at all, Andrew?
Well, I do have a view on it, and I think I endorse what the questioner said. There's been always a lot of pieties about how these issues are going to be improved, and some lines, we mentioned names or anything, have done very well. But you're quite right. Quite often there seems to be almost a chaotic arrival of containers on some ships, on some services, and this is you would think this would be a quick win, but as was pointed out, this quick win has taken over 20 years to fail to be won, if you like. So, yeah, an area of great possible improvement, I think.
Okay. Charles?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think big ships are a challenge, but they're also an opportunity, because it takes a lot of time to bring a vessel alongside, turn it, and send it back. So when you get more volume within one ship, you actually save a lot of idle time. But and indeed, terminal needs to improve productivity and intensity in order to reduce the port stay so that the port stay don't continue to increase. Today on the Asia-Europe stream, it's approximately a week extra because of low terminal productivity. But what I believe is the only way to achieve it is by cooperation with the lines, to have joint team to look at everything from pilot to pilot on how to reduce the port stay. And that's indeed a huge work, and there's a huge part to be done on the line side. And you know, it's been done in the past, in 2011, on 15 main port in Asia. We were able to reduce the port stay by 15% sustainably without no equipment or investment by doing collaboration. And so that's possible, but 50% of the time was saved by the line. So actually lines have a huge part to do in order to improve their own process. And the last thing I would say is that it's actually not line now, it's alliance. Within the same alliance, there should be the same process. And so there's a huge part within the alliance where they need to work in order to align their own process, so they have one process towards terminal and not each individual line processes.
Interesting point. Kevin, have you noticed, as ports have been expected, terminals have been expected to drive up their productivity, or try and drive up their productivity to handle these bigger ships, that's resulted in any more injuries or claims or damage to equipment in the ports?
Not yet. I think we're not seeing an increase of frequency resulting from these larger volumes, which is kind of counterintuitive. What we are seeing is when something does go wrong, there are more units involved. There's a higher expense on a one-off. So no, I think, I don't want to say quite the opposite, but slightly the opposite. We're seeing a benign claims trend in terms of frequency.
Okay, thank you. This may be a simplistic question, Hans, but is it not surprising perhaps that crane productivity has gone down a little bit? Because the cranes that are working these big ships, although they've got the beam, they sometimes haven't got the height, and they're travelling a full service cycle every time they go to an outer tier of containers. So is it not inevitable with the bigger ships, the more containers on those ships, that the crane speed is actually going, the productivity is going to go into decline a bit?
Yeah, of course that's part of it. What we actually have seen, and at least also when I talk to the terminals and the operations department, is that our stowage on such large vessels can be much more concentrated. So of course when you have a higher crane, naturally you lose a little bit of time, but there's much less, if you do your planning right together, there's much less shifting of cranes. You can work much more units in one bay, and that's what really drives up the productivity to just keep going. So we would actually expect that if you concentrate more on higher call sizes on the ship, you would have some productivity gains, despite maybe some longer distance to outer tiers.
Okay, fine. Some further questions? Gentleman at the front here, please. Keep your fit, Sam.
Hi, Joe Lowe, Container Management Magazine. I was wondering if you think the growing size of ships, is that solely down to economics, or is there a bit of human ego from people involved?
Let's start with Charles on that one.
Yes. No, it's definitely slot cost advantage. There's a huge slot cost advantage with the big ship. I would say for some line even more than others, like a Triple E that have 2 engines on board. I think they actually enjoy higher economies than other vessels of the same size. There's too many ships that have been ordered. There is overcapacity, that's for sure, but that has happened also in the past, maybe not to that level. And so that will make the industry running into challenge for many years. But let's imagine we didn't have the big ship. What would happen? You would have to run the same volume with a lot smaller vessels, which terminal would not be able to handle, because the time to bring vessel alongside and send it back would increase. So instead of having one big ship, you have 3 small ones. Terminal would not be able to handle. So actually, I think it helped the overall supply chain. As long as terminal can reduce the port stay, then we can get the efficiency into it. I just want to say one thing. The problem is not really the 10 seconds it had for handling big vessels, for the trolley to move. The problem is the yard. The yard are not big enough. They're not designed to support the quay. And they're designed to support only half the quay. And so that's why you need to focus on the big ship, on the productivity, and then remove the volume out of the port as soon as possible. Container terminal are not our gateway. They are not a parking lot for container. Container should never stay on board the terminal. They should move immediately.
Before I pass it over to other panellists, that was an interesting observation. You say that the economies of scale, I think you said this, on the Triple E's with the 2 engines was perhaps better than those with the single. So why is it that everybody else is ordering the big ships with just single propulsion units?
I mean, there's still economy of scale with the new 19 or 20,000 TEU vessels. But the economies of scale is actually reducing as we go bigger. So it means that next ship for me is not a 24,000, it's 28,000. Or you need to really go next level in order to reduce. So there's still economy of scale, but what I'm saying is that I think Maersk Line is even enjoying bigger economy of scale because they have 2 engines on board. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
It's hard to verify, but with 2 engines, then you can manage the speed to be exactly right, so to have the right consumption, even at the lower speed.